from the old Pubco Studios in beautiful downtown Oklahoma City. I'm Darnell Mayberry, Assistant Sports Editor of the Oklahoman, joined today by OU writer Ryan Aber, a columnist extraordinaire, Jenny Carlson.
Please.
And you're watching Football Friday, an OU edition of Football Friday. We're talking all things Sooners leading up to the Sugar Bowl. Oklahoma football, a lot of things going on right now surrounding the Sooners. But let's start with last night, Thursday night, the award show. Dede Westbrook gets the Biletnikoff Award, first Sooner in OU history or first Sooners receiver in OU history to win the award. Ryan, just where does Dede Westbrook rank among all-time Sooners receivers?
Well, I think you'd have to put him behind Ryan Broyles and Sterling Shepard just because of the length of career, the length of production that those two guys had. But after that, he's right up there. I mean, just a fantastic year for him. To be able to complete the number of 40-yard and over touchdowns that he did, 12 this season, is just phenomenal. The jump that he made from his junior year has been fantastic. But so I wouldn't quite put him at the top, but he's not too far down the list.
Yeah, I think what Ryan said is right. If Dede Westbrook had a little more of an impact a year ago, I think you might throw him into the conversation, even though it was just a 2-year career because of his junior college time. But when you look at, Sterling Shepard, just the length of career, the impact that he had, when you look at Ryan Broyles, the career numbers that he put up, it's kind of hard to put anybody above those guys. And I know there's some old-time folks that'll say, there were guys back in the day that should be considered. But with the numbers and the production of these offenses today, it's really hard to look past current day guys with the air raid and the up-tempo when you're talking about best wide receivers ever. But clearly winning the Biletnikoff and what he did the last 9 games of the year, I mean, it's impressive. It's really unbelievable.
Dede Westbrook has doubled his receiving yards from last season. He had, I think, 4 touchdowns as a junior, 18, I believe, this season. So he's really had a heck of a year, capped, obviously, by the Biletnikoff Award. But, Ryan, I tried to go back and find one of our special preview sections for this football season to see who we picked as the most overlooked Sooner. And I don't think any of us had Dede Westbrook coming into this season. How did he get here? What was key for him this season?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just he needed to be that number one guy. Last year he didn't have to be with Sterling Shepard as a part of that offense and really took a step forward this year. One of the biggest question marks with this team coming into the year was at wide receiver. Who would replace Sterling Shepard at 1? Who would be the secondary guys? We knew that Dede Westbrook had been pretty solid last year. We didn't see him as a star. Mark Andrews had been really good last year. We wondered if he could take the next step. But Dede Westbrook, the combination of speed to get behind defenses and escapability once he did it. I mean, we saw the move that he put on the West Virginia linebacker in that game. We saw the move that he put on the Oklahoma State DB in that long touchdown he had then. It was just really phenomenal for him, and it's his biggest step forward from a junior to a senior year that I can remember for a player.
Jenny, do you think the coaching staff knew what they had in Dede Westbrook, especially after losing Sterling Shepard last year?
It's a good question. And, I have to think that they saw signs of, what Westbrook could do. But clearly, Sterling Shepard was the fail-safe, if you will, for Baker Mayfield a year ago. The guy that if things were breaking down and he needed to get the ball to somebody, and for good reason, the guy's fantastic. I mean, he's becoming a fail-safe for Eli Manning for the New York Giants, for crying out loud. So it's not a bad thing to say that he was a guy that you could find if everything was going wrong. But I don't know that. I mean, could anybody really have seen this level of production? I mean, here's a guy that, he catches hardly anything at West Virginia, but makes arguably the biggest play of the game that sort of let West Virginia know this is for real. And then obviously he's having a huge game against OSU, gets knocked out, and still finishes with over 100 yards of receiving. Just, really hard to wrap your head around numbers, even in the video game numbers of today. Sets the all-time record, I think, against, Texas with, was it 232?
Yeah, it was right around 230 yards, 3 touchdowns, wasn't it?
And just big play after big play. I mean, just unbelievable. So, I don't know if they knew just to the level. I mean, I think he was the name thrown around in the preseason as the guy that everybody felt could be that Sterling Shepard replacement. but I don't know if anybody saw this level of replacement.
And I also think he was helped out tremendously by the protection that he was given. You know, you talk about being the fail-safe with Sterling Shepard for Baker Mayfield. This year, Baker Mayfield didn't need that as much, and when he did, he was able to buy more time, and Dede was farther down the field when they needed to do those things. I mean, we saw that Oklahoma State play. Baker, for one of the first times this season, is pointing at guys, telling them where to go on the field, finds Dede Westbrook a good, 35 yards downfield for that catch, and wound up being a catch and score. So I think that was also important in Dede Westbrook's development this year.
One more thing about Dede, Ryan. What did this season do for his professional future?
Oh, it skyrockets him. He was a guy who really wasn't on the radar as far as NFL draft stuff a year ago, but now he's in that mix. I don't think he's going to be one of the top, 2 wide receivers picked. The guy from Western Michigan is right up there. There's a couple others who are getting a lot of talk, but I think when you get past that very top level, he's right there. We're talking a second or third round type of guy.
Well, and he's the type of guy, he's not the biggest receiver, so that's going to be a little bit of an issue when it comes to NFL draft stock, but the speed that he has, I mean, NFL types are going to love that, and he catches everything. I think, was it Baker Mayfield that said at one point this season that you really can't underthrow the guy and you can't overthrow the guy?
Yeah. I think he didn't catch six catchable passes that were thrown his way all year. Didn't wind up as receptions for Dede Westbrook.
It's really unbelievable. I mean, that's the type of thing that, if you're talking about NFL, needs, they need guys that can make catches that seem impossible. I mean, the windows that these guys, the quarterbacks are throwing through, the split seconds that these receivers have to make a catch. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm with Ryan. I don't necessarily know that he's the first wide receiver off the board, but he's definitely moved up into probably a second-day pick, and I think there might even be somebody that sees something that they like even more. And the other thing is, he's a guy that's been through a lot to get to this point. He's going to appreciate what comes his way. I don't get a sense like he's a locker room cancer type of guy in any form or fashion. Is very low key, does not have that diva attitude that you see out of a lot of wide receivers, and I have to think NFL types love that too.
I don't know that I quite call him low key.
All right. I don't know about low key.
I think because he's right around Baker Mayfield as far as guys who get his teammates energized. But you are right in that he's not a guy who's going to cause problems. He doesn't whine when balls don't get thrown his way. I mean, we saw that West Virginia game, like Jenny said, he only had 2 catches. They were both really early in the game. He was really happy that they got out with the win. He was thrilled with the way they did that. So that's not going to be a problem. But like I said, I don't know that I call him low key.
Low key, maybe not the right word, but he's definitely that diva thing that so many wide receivers get. Not even close with him, to what I know of him at least.
You guys mentioned the speed. You mentioned his ability to make great catches, receptions. The one thing I didn't hear you guys say is the yards after catch. He really showed a lot of flashes this year of being able to break tackles and make big plays and take those catches beyond wherever he caught the ball.
Yeah, and I think that goes along with a couple of those catches that I mentioned, the West Virginia catch, the Oklahoma State catch, to be able to catch them and then do things with them. We've got to mention the Baylor play. I mean, that was just phenomenal to be able to control his body, to stay in bounds and tightrope along the sidelines like that. But he can do a little bit of everything. He can break tackles. He can get behind you and just flat out beat you with speed. So I think he's a guy that NFL folks are going to like a lot, because he can do so many different things for you at wide receiver.
Also strikes me that he's shown some skill in the return game, and that's just another facet that when you're an NFL team, and if you think we might be able to use him in punt returns or kickoff returns, that I would think they'd like that too.
Guys, what was it like watching that speed up close live? What was that like?
It was phenomenal. I mean, to see a guy that fast and just be able to straight go down the field and burn a DB, beat a corner is something that's incredible to watch, and sort of wish I would have got to watch it from field level a little bit more, because that's when you really can appreciate speed. But even in a press box, I mean, just seeing the way that he would just float by guys who were moving really fast themselves was incredible. It felt like an NFL wide receiver.
I was in the press box for that Kansas game when he had the punt return, which I think was his only punt return for a touchdown this year.
Was.
But it was really well blocked. I mean, I don't think he got touched at all. But still, to see him accelerate, I mean, it's sort of like games you watch the other Westbrook in the state. You watch Russell Westbrook and you think, wait, I know he's on the field or on the floor, with other really good players, really good athletes, but yet you see him sort of separate himself, and yeah, the speed is unbelievable. And I'm just really glad he got over that hamstring injury, because we really got treated to something special out of D.D. Westbrook this year.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention that the catch he had against Kansas, laying out flat in the back of the end zone to catch the pass from Baker Mayfield was just incredible. Another one of the many highlight plays that he had this year.
I think Adam Kemp, our web guy, put together a compilation of all of Didi's touchdowns, and it's worth watching because they're all like, whoa, that was, you're just sort of like energized each time you watch, because he really made a lot of spectacular
and imagine
plays
if they had a healthy D.D. Westbrook early in the season against Houston, against Ohio State. Not saying it would have made the difference completely, especially against Ohio State, but just to see that would have been incredible, and to see the numbers that he would have put up in those games, and even the Louisiana Monroe game when he wasn't healthy, that would have been amazing as well. Then you might start talking about him as the best receiving season in Oklahoma history.
Yeah. Let's stick with the award theme for a moment. The Heisman Trophy ceremony is Saturday night in New York City. Our Brooke Pryor is in New York City reporting on not only D.D. Westbrook, who is one of the 5 finalists, but also OU quarterback Baker Mayfield. Guys, I think we all presume Lamar Jackson to be the favorite at this point, but what are the chances that Baker Mayfield or D.D. Westbrook sneaks in and, who knows, either captures it or finishes top 3? What are their chances?
I think there's a decent chance that one of them finishes top 3. I think it's going to be really difficult for them to win it, just because I think with the way the Heisman vote is structured, where you give a top 3, it's going to be really difficult, or was really difficult, I think, for voters to put both those guys in the top 3, which is going to mean voters are going to have to deal with the decision. Do I pick Baker Mayfield or do I pick D.D. Westbrook? There's going to be a lot that are come down on the D.D. Westbrook side, a lot that come down on the Baker Mayfield side. I think that combination is going to make a difference and keep them from winning. I think the interesting thing to me is if you combine the votes together, what are they going to be like compared to Lamar Jackson's numbers? Because I think Lamar Jackson has a chance to win this by a historic margin.
Yeah, I think Lamar Jackson is my favorite right now, and we don't have any votes in this building. We decided to give those up a couple years ago, so we're not saying what we did. We're just saying what we kind of assume is out there. But clearly, in my mind, if you're a voter and you value the finishing kick, I think you got to look pretty seriously at Baker Mayfield. And it's not to discredit what D.D. Westbrook did, but the numbers that Baker Mayfield put up in conference play, I mean, it's unbelievable. And Lamar Jackson really struggled down the stretch. They lost their last 2 games at Louisville, and he did not play very well. I think they scored 10 in their next to last game, and they scored more in their last game, but he had, I think, 3 interceptions. So definitely not the finish that Lamar Jackson would have, frankly, anybody at Louisville would have liked, because they lost those 2 games. But, Mayfield was really good late, and some people might say, well, the Big 12's not very good. Well, Lamar Jackson wasn't exactly playing against the greatest competition. Some really good teams in that league, but not top to bottom fantastic. So he had a chance to build some stats throughout the year. But it is the split vote thing, I mean, it's going to be tough. We saw, obviously, Matt Leinart won it the year that both Jason White and Adrian Peterson were there. But there was definitely a problem. Like, who do you pick when you've got White and Peterson? I think it hurt those guys that year, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it, hurt these guys too this year.
Jenny, obviously you've written about this, but the Heisman Trophy balloting, they're changing the way they're doing that in the next couple of years, where it's going to become public who votes on Heisman. The Heisman voters' votes are going to be public. How do you think that's going to change this award?
If that's happening, that's news to me. I don't think they're going to.
I think it's the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah. The Hall of Fame.
Mistake,
no, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, that would be a great move, I think, by the Heisman. They've sort of gone the other way in recent years and sort of put the kibosh on voters to talk about. I wish they would make it public. I think another change that Ryan kind of alluded to is you only have the top 3 on your ballot. I'd love to see them go top 5. I think it would really be interesting to see if they would do a top 5 on the ballot. But lots of questions in my mind about the future of the Heisman voting. I think they should go public, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. They've really kind of gone quiet on this, and that was part of the reason why we gave up our votes, Ryan.
Yeah, it was, and we're journalists. We like to talk about things. We preach openness and transparency. So why participate in something that is certainly not open and not transparent? On some level, you can see why they do it, but like you wrote the other day, to have ESPN come in and be sort of the lone voice in that is just a little much. And I am with you. I think that top 5 would be the way to go voting wise, because voters now see so much more college football than they did when this voting process was implemented. You're able to see pretty much everybody. The regional biases, while still present, aren't as strong as they were, I think, when this started. And I think if you went top 5, you'd have a much better representation of a hierarchy of the top players in college football.
It's also interesting that they've not cut off this early voting thing that they do. They send out the ballots. I believe this year it was November 21st was when voting opened. Think about how much football was left to be played on November 21st. It's pretty much all electronic at this point, so you could essentially wait until midnight on the Sunday.
Well, and you've got this, even if you wait until after all the games are over on that Saturday night, so midnight on that Sunday, you've got, I think it's almost 48 hours. It closes at 5 p.m. On Monday is when the voting closes.
Right.
So you've got this about, 29-hour or
It'd be almost a day and a half.
40-hour window.
Yeah.
40-hour window, 41-hour window to cast your vote after every bit of action is completed. To me, that's plenty. Everybody has time in that 40-hour span to go on and put your vote in.
What are the chances of them changing that in the near future?
About the chances of me winning the Heisman Trophy.
Okay. Well, there's my answer.
And it seems elementary, but I think one of the reasons I think they probably won't is because, and again, we're operating under not a lot of knowledge because the voting has gone so underground. But to my knowledge, a lot of Heisman votes get left with voters pretty much as long as they will still be wanting to vote. And that even includes once you've finished covering teams. Even if you're Scott Wright, who's one of our high school writers, used to be a college beat writer here. He had a Heisman vote, and he made the point earlier this week, they still send me stuff. They still send me releases about their foundation and work they're doing. He doesn't have a vote anymore, but they're still able to find him and send him this stuff. I think that sort of speaks to the fact that they keep voters on their rolls for a long time, and a lot of those include maybe not so computer savvy writers and media members out there. So I think the need to have those votes come in by mail from some people, I think that leaves that early voting thing in play, Ryan. It's weird. It's antiquated. It feels old-fashioned.
And I don't know if there is any kind of paper balloting. If there is, that should be completely done away with. I mean, I'm a part of, or at least invited to vote for some other awards, and none of them are like that. They are all, specifically the Biletnikoff Award, you have a 1-week window to vote that ends at midnight on Sunday, the day after those games. And even though you can vote before games are completed, it's still only 1 week, and it's still only the teams that are playing on that last weekend, which shrinks the field down even more.
Yeah. Guys, let's turn our attention a little bit to some of the other key players for these Sooners. I'm talking Samaje Perine, Joe Mixon, Jordan Thomas. All three of these guys have decisions to make regarding their NFL futures. What do you guys see from them? Who do you expect to go? Who do you expect to stay?
Well, I'm going to say that Jordan Thomas to me is a no-brainer. He's got to stay after the season that he had. A year ago, I would have said there's no doubt he's going to leave after his junior season, but Jordan Thomas really struggled in coverage for a lot of the year. Now, at the end of the year, he was making plays, but he was still getting burned, I think, too much. So to go through that, I think Jordan Thomas would certainly be well-served to stay for another year. The other guys, Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon are the two other ones that have big-time decisions looming. I think Joe Mixon's gone. I can't see him sticking around for another year after the season he had, everything he's got to deal with here. I think maybe it's just time for a fresh start somewhere else for him. And obviously he's going to have to deal with some things, and who knows how that incident and the possibility of that tape coming out soon will affect him with the NFL, but I think the farther he gets that in the rearview mirror, the better. Samaje Perine is going to be really interesting to me. I'd probably put him like a 60-40 to leave at this point after the season he had. But with Christian McCaffrey coming out, with Leonard Fournette and the other really good running backs in this class, I think Joe Mixon is a guy who can break through that. And all it takes is convincing one team that you're rehabilitated, that this isn't a lingering issue, that you're going to be fine. I think Joe Mixon is a guy who can do that for just one team. It doesn't have to be all the teams. But I think Samaje Perine would be better served coming back. But I think I would lean slightly toward him leaving.
Jenny, the first guy Ryan mentioned was Jordan Thomas. If he does come back, that would be huge for the Sooners given the issues that they've had in the secondary. What do you envision that position looking like next year if Jordan Thomas does indeed come back?
Well, you're right. It does look a whole lot different if you have Jordan Thomas in the secondary. Clearly, a lot of young parts that got moved in and out of that secondary this year. They're still evolving. They're still developing. But if you have Jordan Thomas and Stephen Parker, who has, one more year after this year?
Yeah, Stephen Parker's going to be back.
I think if you bring back those two veterans into the secondary, plus those young guys, I think it looks a whole lot better. Now, some people would say they struggled, they're the same guys, maybe you need some fresh blood back there. But I think you definitely, when you look at the talent that Jordan Thomas and Stephen Parker bring, I think that's a much more stable secondary going into next year than if you say, well, not only do you have to continue to evolve those young guys, but you got to bring in a replacement for Jordan Thomas.
Yeah.
That's tough.
And then on the other side of Thomas, you've got Parrish Cobb, who showed some really good flashes early in the season before getting hurt. He's come back and finally got into game action last week for the first time in Bedlam. And then Jordan Parker, who's been, I think, really good, steadily improved as the year went on. He's got some potential to be a really good playmaker. I think the question is, how do these guys develop, given the fact that Oklahoma has struggled at developing guys? I mean, we've seen, Stan Von Taylor got a lot of playing time really early in his career. He disappeared. Dakota Austin played in that Sugar Bowl against Alabama. He had a brief shining moment last year when Zach Sanchez got hurt, had to replace him, but then he fell off. Hatari Bird, sort of the same trajectory before he left the team. So I think we see this repeatedly with Oklahoma DBs. Those guys need to develop. They've got to have Parrish Cobb, Jordan Parker, and those guys get better from year to year.
Well, and I think, too, a guy like Jordan Thomas coming back, too many Jordans. I always have to
way
stop
too
and
many
think,
Jordans. Way
which
too
Jordan
many
am I
Jordans.
about?
So can we talk about Evans? Can we talk about Wade? Maybe Smallwood?
Could we not? Could we? Now my brain is really going to explode. But if Jordan Thomas comes back, that only helps a guy like Justin Broyles, the Millwood kid who's committed to go to OU. A guy that, if he can be brought along as opposed to potentially being thrown in the fire.
Like we've seen this year so many times.
And we've seen over the last couple years with guys that have gotten into situations where they have to be called into duty. They may or may not play well, but then, it could really hurt a guy's confidence. And it's not, confidence is not what playing in the secondary is built on, but it's part of it. You've got to play with that confidence that you're going to potentially get beat every once in a while, but you got to come back and play well. And you really, Broyles is the type of guy that he could potentially play some, early in his career, but it sure would help to have veterans and talent around him to bring a guy like that along.
Yeah. Speaking of staying or going, Houston made a big hire. Controversial hire. Major Applewhite has gone to Houston to be its new head coach. Houston, the Cougars
stayed in Houston to be its
Oh
new
yeah,
head coach.
he's staying
Moved down the
as
hall.
offensive coordinator. He
Yeah.
got promoted. Thank you. Houston passed up some big names, including the Sooners' Lincoln Riley, offensive coordinator, and Alabama offensive coordinator Lane Kiffin, to promote Major Applewhite. Where does this leave Lincoln Riley now? What are the chances that he returns? Is there another opportunity out there for him that you see, Ryan?
I just don't see one of the jobs open and making sense for him right now. I think it made sense for him to go to a school in Texas where he's so familiar. He's recruited down there a lot. He's from Texas. He started off at Texas Tech. So I think the Houston fit was a good one, although I think Houston did a good thing going away from Lane Kiffin, the retread type guy, rather than going after a young guy with Major Applewhite like Lincoln Riley. But I think Lincoln Riley, especially after Baker Mayfield's announcement that he was going to be back for another year, it makes sense for him to stay for another year, to look for another opportunity. Does Texas Tech come open with Cliff Kingsbury and the problems that he's had down there? If that comes open, you'd figure he'd be a perfect fit for that job, to be able to bring back Mike Leach without actually bringing back Mike Leach. It seems like that he would be better served to come back for one more year, show another high-powered offense, and then make that move.
Lincoln Riley seems like a guy to me that if he wanted to be a head coach, there's myriad possibilities out there. I mean, there's all sorts of jobs open and available. But to me, if I'm in Lincoln Riley's shoes, I want to be a head coach at a program where I can win. And I can win pretty quickly. And he's going to be in position to get that kind of job. I think Houston was an option where he could have gone and won. I mean, they had guys to run the offense that he would want to run. But you don't want to jump at the first job that's out there. I mean, like I said, there are going to be jobs continue to open up. If he really just wanted to jump into a job, I don't think there's any doubt he could get one. But he's a guy that can be selective. He can be choosy. He's got a great job at Oklahoma right now. Who knows? Someday he might be in line to be the head coach at Oklahoma. We thought that might be the case with the guy that came before him, and Josh Heupel. So, it's not too far-fetched in my mind to say that he's a guy that Oklahoma would look at for that job whenever Bob Stoops decides he's done. Does he need to be a head coach before then? I don't know. But there are going to be good options out there for Lincoln Riley. Maybe not this year, but they're going to continue to come because he's going to continue to have, I think, really good offenses at Oklahoma. So he doesn't have to jump at the first job out there.
Ryan, Lincoln Riley, it seems like it's not a matter of if, but when.
Yeah.
And so when this happens, just give us an idea of what Bob Stoops' track record is in replacing coordinators like Lincoln Riley who are on the rise, and eventually we'll move on to bigger and better things.
Well, he's had a pretty good one. I mean, when you talk about going from Mike Leach to Mark Mangino, trying to think the exact timeline, but Chuck Long, Kevin Wilson. I mean, he's repeatedly brought in offensive coordinators who have had a lot of success in Norman. Now, we can talk about their success after they leave Norman, which is a completely different story. But as far as the guys he's brought in to Norman, they've been really good, and he's developed guys. I mean, really up until Josh Heupel, especially, their quarterback development had been really good for a long time. So I don't think there's going to be a problem in replacing him when it happens. But like Jenny said, does he stick around for if Bob Stoops steps down? Is he the natural guy? I think right now, when you look at guys on that staff, there's only one that makes sense as a head coach in the short term, and that's Lincoln Riley.
Yeah. What about the other guys? The other guys on staff? What are the chances that we see someone else potentially get away if it's not Lincoln Riley?
I think, to me, Dennis Simmons is a guy to watch, the wide receivers coach. He's had a great track record just the last couple of years with Sterling Shepard. Obviously, we saw what he did with D.D. Westbrook this year. So he's the guy to watch, maybe an offensive coordinator job somewhere if that opened. Certainly, if Lincoln Riley left, you could see him coming along as an offensive coordinator with him. I think everybody else is pretty solid. Bill Bedenbaugh's a guy who has a great reputation, though, nationally. If a really big job comes open, you could see him at least entertaining that. Outside of that, I think everything's pretty stable right now.
Yeah, there was, even with the problems on the defensive side of the ball throughout this year, you never got the sense from Bob Stoops that there was going to be some sort of, coaching, upheaval that he was going to say, all right, we're going to replace these position coaches and try to get better. You never got any sense from Bob Stoops to that effect. So while I think there might have been a time where, Sooners, if they'd have got to the end of the year, not been Big 12 champs, continued to struggle in the secondary and lose games, I think you might have seen Bob Stoops doesn't like to fire anybody, but he definitely, has given some nudges, and he has fired some people over the last few years. So who knows if that would have been different if, say, the Sooners are 8-4 or 9-3, not Big 12 champs. That could have been different on the defensive side of the ball with some of those position coaches. But I'm with Ryan. I think there's a chance that maybe a guy or two gets looked at for some other jobs elsewhere, just depending on what, a guy like Major Applewhite might make a play for Bedenbaugh because he knows that, how to really develop the offensive lineman for that spread offense. Who knows? Maybe somebody throws money at one of these guys or somebody wants to be a coordinator, they maybe make a move. But I don't see, unless they choose, or maybe an NFL team comes along and says they're interested, because we saw that a year or two ago come out of the blue.
With Jerry Montgomery.
Yeah, so, those sorts of things. But as far as expecting any moves, I just can't see it at this point.
Yeah, and especially when you talk about the recruiting success that they're having for 2017. They want to keep that together. Tim Kish has been oft maligned, but he's done a really good job recruiting for that 2017 class. Mike Stoops has had a lot of success, and on and on and on. So I think that that, as much as anything, would keep a move from being made, just to make a move when you're talking about the defensive problems that they had specifically.
Thanks, guys. That's all for Football Friday. The Sooners will play Auburn in the Sugar Bowl on January 2nd. That's a Monday night. For complete Sooners coverage and all of college football, follow these guys right here at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.